How's it going, everybody? And welcome back to my QRP Head-to-Head series. So today we've got another matchup of CW QRP radios. So currently our reigning champ is the Elecraft KX1. This cover is really cool. I got this from Tufton, from Joshua N5FY. This is a really cool 3D printed lead. It's got magnets in it. It comes with cap screws that replace the screws that go on the face of this radio. And it's really cool. It protects all the knobs and everything on this radio. This is a really cool setup. But anyway, this is our current reigning champ. And we talked about why. We talked about why I thought this radio, even though it had some shortcomings and it's really hard to get, why I thought this was kind of the best all-around CW field radio you could get. Now, I do still want to get my hands on a KH1, but until I do, this is kind of my favorite for a lot of different reasons. Oddly enough, this one doesn't go out in the field as often as I would like to, just because it's, quite frankly, it's hard to replace, and I don't want to hurt it. I hate to use that as an excuse, but now that I've got this, so I can protect my, this always goes in a Pelican case, but now that I've got this to protect those knobs and encoders and everything, I'm a lot more tempted to take this out more often, because when it's in the case and it bounces around, I don't have to worry about it hurting anything. But we talked about why this was such a compelling radio for a portable CW operator, right? So let me fold this paper so that we're looking at the KX1. So we talked about some of the things that I really liked about this. Well, the price, good luck. Like I said, this thing's kind of unobtainium. They haven't made them in years. But if you can find them on the used market, if you can find a reasonable one, it'll be probably someplace between $450 and $600, depending on how it's laid out. This one has everything. This one's 80/40, 30/20. This one's got the internal tuner. It's got all the bells and whistles for a KX1. But just to sort of reiterate some of the points we made about this radio, it's 5.2 inches by 3 inches by 1.3 inches. It weighs about 9 ounces. That's without batteries in it. Puts out about 5 watts. It's a little less than that. It's got an internal tuner, but it's not very wide. It won't tune, like, for instance, my 71-foot random wire I've got here for my shack. It will not tune 30 meters. Not all the radios had internal tuners. Mine does. Like I said, it's got sort of internal batteries. It takes AA's, and they don't last very long, but they'll get the job done in a pinch. This particular radio is a four-band radio, so it's 80/40, 30/20. Like I said, some radios are 2-band. They'd just be 40/20, and some are 3-band, which are 40/30/20. This one has all 4. It is a CW-only radio, and it did only come as a kit, which means that the quality of the radio is going to kind of be dependent on the person who built the kit. If the person who built the kit was competent, then you'll have a decent radio. If you get one where the person maybe wasn't the greatest solderer or wasn't very good with attention to detail, you might have a lemon. If you look at Thomas Witherspoon's KX1s, he's got one that's been driving him up the wall, and that radio, probably wasn't put together the greatest. He's got others that were. Like I said, whoever built this one did a really nice job. The solder joints were all really nice. The attention to detail was pretty crazy. But I'm not going to rehash everything about this radio because you can watch my previous video about this radio to get all the features and everything. But again, it does have I think it's a 3-digit display. It doesn't give you a whole lot of information. This does have adjustable RF and AF gains. It does have a variable filter, and it's basically infinitely adjustable between about 50 and 2500 hertz. It does have the super cool logging lamp that, everybody loves so much. I'm kidding. And no, it's not really super useful. I mean, I guess it could be useful, but it's kind of funny. It's one of those quirky things about this radio. But again, this has a lot of compelling things about it, right? It's not very big. It's not very heavy. It is definitely bigger than, say, my MTR3B or an SW3B or even like a true SDX, but it's about the same size as a Mountain Topper MTR4B, other than having the knobs that stick out the front, right? But this is a really nice radio because the feature set lends itself to, portable operation. It can operate on internal batteries in a pinch. It does have a tuner, so if you are having SWR issues, you can hit the tuner and tune up, even if you're using a resonant antenna that just for whatever reason doesn't want to your SWR is a little high or whatever, you'll get that sometimes where your ground conductivity is different. You set an antenna up in one place and it works great. You set it up someplace else and you can't get it to tune correctly. You can hit the tuner in this and match it. It will match random wires, but not super well. But again, it's got, like I said, it's got CW memories. It's got actual RF and AF gains. It's got an actual adjustable filter. It's got very easily adjustable key speed. This is a really nice radio. Again, really hard to get your hands on. And this is not a radio for everybody. This is kind of, if you're somebody like me who likes to collect kind of oddball QRP CW radios, this is kind of one of the gold standards, right? But like I said, there were a lot of reasons why I really loved this radio. Now, the radio I'm going to be putting up against this today is a very, very different radio. It has all of the same basic feature sets, just on steroids, but it is for a completely different kind of operator. And that radio is the Penntek TR-45 Lite. Now, this radio belongs to my buddy Ed Bennett, W4EMB. If you've never checked out Ed's channel, you should do so. Ed's got great content on there. This is Ed's absolute favorite radio. He loaned it to me, wanted me to try it out and see what I thought, and I really appreciate the opportunity, Ed. So I want to talk about my thoughts about this radio, who I think it's for, and how I think it stacks up against that KX1. Now, I've done 2 activations with this radio, and I've done some hunting here at home. I haven't done any rag chews or anything on it. I just haven't had the opportunity. But I've used it enough to have an opinion about the radio itself, some of the things I like, some of the things I don't like, who I think it's for, and things like that. So let's go over some of the specs, and then we'll actually take a look at the radio. So the Penntek TR-45 Lite, and there are different versions of this radio. There's the skinny version. You can get it with or without a lot of the different options we're going to talk about, but this particular one is a shack in a box. So this radio is $740. It is currently available. You can go on the Penntek website right now and order one of these today. They have them available to ship. It's 8.5 inches by 5 inches by 3 inches, so it is a pretty hefty beast. It's pretty big. It weighs 2.8 pounds. Okay, it is a honker. That's one of the things that is going to be a detractor for somebody like me in certain instances. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It depends on who you are. Power output's about 5 watts. It's a 5-band radio, so it's 80, 40, 30, 20, and 17. It is CW only. Like I said, it's a shack in a box. It's got a Z-Match tuner. It's got an internal speaker. It's got an internal battery. This radio has a really, really compelling feature set. So let's take a look at this radio, and let's talk about some of the different features that this radio has. Talk about some of the things I like about it. Talk about some of the things maybe I'm not such a big fan of. We'll see if we can find some stations to listen to on it. I've got kind of an odd viewing angle. There's no easy way to set this radio up so that, in fact, I wonder if I can prop it up with the KX1. There we go. We'll use a $600 doorstop there. Okay, got a little bit of a glare from the light above us, but it's not horrendous. Okay, so let's talk about some of the stuff on the front of this radio, and we will have to look at the sides and the back also because this radio is chock full of stuff. So on the front here, we have this super cool analog meter. This is your S meter. It's your power meter. It's also your SWR meter. You've got a high SWR light, so if you're above 2-to-1 SWR, that light will come on. Your RF power switch here, we can go forward and reverse. In forward, it will show you your power output. In reverse, it will show you SWR. This switch right here is for your CW memories, so you can record and play. It's got 2 separate jacks, one for a straight key and one for paddles, which originally I thought was kind of strange. I actually really, really like this feature, and here's why. When you go to tune this radio up, you want it in straight key mode so you can key down and adjust your tuner. Most radios, you have to go into the menus and switch it into straight key mode to do that. On this radio, I don't. On this radio, I just plug my key in, even a set of paddles, into that key hole and just key up. Set your meter, set your SWR, and when you're done, if you're running a straight key or a cootie or something, you can leave it right in that port. But if you're running paddles, just switch to that port there, and now you're running the keyer. I really like that feature, especially for a radio that's got a tuner. That makes tuning super easy. Now this is a Z-Match tuner in this radio, so it's a lot like the the ZM2 that I have. This is not a battery-operated auto tuner like in the KX1 or the KX2. We have our key speed. Now, one thing I found about this radio is the key speed is not super accurate. And it's not on a lot of radios, but this one is off more than most. I normally send about 23, 24 words a minute. I put this thing at 23 words a minute. It sounded like I was going to shoot a machine gun. It was like just crazy fast. And so I hit the reverse beacon network and it told me it was like 27 words a minute. I was like, okay, that sounds more like it. So I turned it down to about 19 or 20, and that's about 22 or 23 words a minute. So it's 3 or 4 words a minute off. So that is something to keep in mind with this radio, at least for this particular radio. The key or speed that it shows on the display isn't really indicative of how fast it really is. Your transmit power is exactly what it sounds like. We can turn it up and down. Normally what I do is, and I do this, Ed told me how to do this, get your SWR all set and then key down and then turn this up until your meter reads 5 watts and you're good to go. You know, this will go above 5 watts, but it's not built to, so I wouldn't do that. You can turn it down if you want. You got your RF gain. You got a notch filter. Now, this notch filter isn't really a notch filter from what I found. It more moves your filter side to side. So if you've got a really strong adjacent signal, you can move that back and forth to try to filter that out. It works fairly well. I will say that this radio suffers from something that a lot of my little CW QRP radios do, in that even with a tight filter, you still get some adjacent signal bleed over. If you watch my activations with this, especially the first one, you'll get a lot of that. It wasn't as bad in the second one. It was interesting because the second activation, which was actually today, this radio, the band conditions were absolutely in the tank today. We had a huge solar flare, but this radio did remarkably well. It did a really good job with signal, pulling some weak signals out. The filtering was really good. Now, the first time I used it during an activation was a week ago, and I had a really hard time. I had a lot, adjacent signals were bleeding over. Signals were really weak. I don't know what was going on that particular day. I was at the same park, but at a different location. The bands were in better shape, and it actually performed better with lousy band conditions, so I don't know why. But that is something you've got to watch with a lot of these radios is even with the filters as tight as they'll go, sometimes you'll get some bleed over. We'll talk about filters in a second. Dial lock and battery check are exactly what they sound like. You can lock your VFO. You can check your battery, your volume, right? That's obvious. Tuner, this has a real optical encoder in it, not like that garbage that's in the KX2. This is a good encoder. I'll give them props for that. They did not cheap out on this encoder. Your RIT and your receive mode switches up here. Your band selector and your VFO A and B selector are here. Power on and off. Your headphone jack. This switch underneath this rail at the bottom turns the internal speaker on and off. If you want to use an external speaker, you can plug one in the back. This RX mode switch switches between wide and narrow filtering. And then this switch underneath this handle at the top gives you your ultra narrow filter. Now, I don't know what the filter widths are. I can guess. At wide, it sounds like it's about 1,000 hertz. Narrow sounds like probably about 500 hertz. And then the super narrow one is probably 100 to 200 hertz. I don't know. But it definitely helps. However, even with the narrowest filter in, you'll sometimes get some adjacent signal bleed over. You'll have like a station 500 hertz away, and even with the narrowest filter in, you'll get a little bit of bleed over from that station. It's not horrendous, but it is something to keep in mind, and it's something you don't get in some of the higher end receivers. But all in all, it's laid out well. It's a little busy, but everything's easy to read. It's easy to find. It's easy to use. If we go to the side, you will see we've got, I just turned the radio on. Let me turn it back off. We'll turn it on in a minute. You'll see we've got our speaker here on the side. And then on the back, we've got a number of ports. This is your charge port. So when you're charging the radio, you plug it in here. This one allows you to use an external battery if you choose to do so. This does have an internal battery. Again, we have a Z-Match tuner. This is our switch that puts our tuner in or out. You can see it was out because the antenna I was running today is a resonant vertical. You've got a coax, and you also have a balance line. So you could run ladder line to this. I'm guessing you could probably also just run a random wire off of this, one into each side. This guy right here adjusts your side tone. And this down here is for if you want to run an external speaker, that's your external speaker jack. You'll see there's a handle on top. Couple of feet on the bottom. There are only 2, so that it kind of tips this radio up at a little bit better viewing angle. This is a really good viewing angle for being on a table. It's odd because on the camera's up kind of high, so you don't really get a good idea of what this looks like, but on the table, the viewing angle is quite good. One thing I will say about this radio is because it is so busy on the front, it does have those rails to protect it. If you drop it down, those rails are going to hit before the knobs and switches do. But all the knobs and switches and buttons sticking off of this radio are going to pose an issue if you are somebody who does a lot of hike-in stuff. You're doing hike-in POTAs or sodas. This is going to be a hard radio to put in a pack because it's got so many switches and knobs sticking off not only the front, but the back as well. So that's something to keep in mind. It is also quite large, right? So here's the KX1 in relation. All right, it's insane. If you watch my first activation video I did with this, I compare it to the size of the KX2. And this is much, much bigger than a KX2, much heavier than a KX2. So that's something to keep in mind. And we'll talk about that when we get to the end of this video. Who is this radio for? All right. So let me go ahead and hook coax up to this bad boy. Of course, I'm an idiot. I forgot to unplug it from my FTDX10. So let me do that. And we'll put our adapter on, our BNC adapter. See if we can find some signals here. All right, so again, I apologize that the viewing angle is a little weird. I'm going to use my I'm not going to be able to use a super cheap prop because that super cheap prop now will be in the coax, will be in the way. We'll use my paperweight and see if we can tip that back. Yeah, there we go. All right. My trusty Oswego State paperweight. Okay, so let's go ahead and fire this thing up. And I need... Ooh, that's loud. Let's turn that down. I need my key and cable. Let's plug this guy in. So we've got a Penntek TP3. This one's from the future. It is made in, I don't know if you can read that or not, but right there. See if we can get it to focus. Probably not. Right there, it says this key was made in 2043. One of the reasons we got these keys so cheap, we did a group buy on these keys because they were mismarked. So this is from 20 years in the future. Okay, so let's switch bands. Let's go to 40 meters here. So let's go. So you just hit the band select button. There's 80. There's 40. Got a bunch of digital here, FT8 and stuff. Oh, it's RIDI. There's a RIDI contact. Oh my God, listen to all the RIDI. I'm not even sure if we're gonna find an open frequency. Woo! Wow. Ooh. Well, here's some CW we can listen to. Now let me narrow that filter up a little bit. I've got it on wide. This radio has very good audio. All right, I will give it that. It does have very good audio. I need to find some place that's empty so I can tune the radio up. That sounds good. Okay. So I'm going to turn the power down. Oh, here's somebody. You're going to hear you might hear a little bit of interference. This light above us and my phone are both going to cause a little bit of interference on this radio. So let me go ahead and plug this guy in. So let's hit the key. I got to put the tuner in. Okay, so the tuner is in. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to widen that filter back up, and we're going to turn the knobs till we get the loudest sound we can get on our audio. So once I've got that dialed in, I'll go ahead and hit the key. All right, you can see our SWR is pretty much 0. So let's go ahead and let me narrow that up a little bit. Yeah, so my SWR is perfect. Let me turn the power up. Oh, see, now it's high. See that? So I'm going to go ahead and turn that power down just a little bit. We got about 1 1/4 to 1. Looks good to me. Let's see what we get for power output. All right, we're at about 5 watts. Double check our SWR one more time. 1 1/4 to 1. It's good to me. Okay, so you can hear what that side tone sounds like. Let me just turn our key speed up here. All right, so the audio is fairly pleasant on this radio. I really like the old school funky S meter. Let's go ahead and let's find some CW we can listen to. Or attempt to, anyway. So let's... We're going to have a hard time because there's so much RIDI. I forgot there was a RIDI contest. That's about all we're going to find probably tonight. Other than the occasional. Well, let's go down to the extra portion of the band and see if we hear anything. Now, if you listen, all right, you can hear, I'm on CW narrow. Hear all the signals bleeding over? If I widen this up, listen to this. Okay. So we'll go ahead and narrow that up again. I'll put the narrowest filter on. So I don't know if you can hear that, but you can still hear both stations. That's with the narrowest filter in. We're getting that's some DX here. So all right, so that's one of the issues I have with this radio is that even on the narrowest filter setting, I'm still hearing that station that's just next to us. All right. So that's something, and again, that's not just this radio. A lot of these CW only radios have that. That don't have the best receivers in the world in them. You'll get some bleed over. If I widen that back up, I don't know if you can hear that, but there's 2 stations in there. And if I put the widest filter in, now it's really bad. Okay. Oh, this switch on the side changes the brightness of the gauge and the screen. So, all in all, the audio on this radio is quite good. Like I said, this notch filter isn't so much of a notch. It more shifts the receive back and forth. It does a reasonably good job. I wish I could find some better. Well, let's go down to let's see if there's anything on 80 meters we can hear. There we go. I apologize for the interference. Like I said, I'm getting interference from the light and my phone. but the encoder is nice and smooth. That's a net of some sort. I just heard him say QNI. So at any rate, that gives you an idea what the audio sounds like on this radio. It's quite good. Like I said, I do have a little bit of an issue with how much signal bleed over there is. It's a little obnoxious sometimes. It wasn't as bad today. If you got another station that's within 500 hertz of you, no matter how tight you make that filter, you're going to get some bleed over. It's not horrendous. I've definitely heard much worse radios, but that is something that you need to consider. Oh, I know what's causing all that interference. That's my washing machine. That thing's an RFI machine. Okay, so anyway, let's go ahead and shut this thing off, and let's talk a little bit about this radio. Talk about some of the things that I like about it, and some of the things that I don't like about it. And there aren't a lot of dislikes, as much as there are personal preference things. This is quite a compelling package. Like I said, it does have some flaws, I think, but they're not things that are deal breakers. So let's talk about the positives. It's a shack in a box. You don't need anything other than this radio and a key and an antenna. You need nothing else. You don't need a speaker. You don't need a tuner. You don't need a battery. You just grab this guy, your key, your wire, whatever antenna you want to run, and you're on the air. Pick it up like a lunch bag. In fact, it's about the size of a lunchbox. Pick it up like a lunchbox on this handle, carry it in, and you're good. The feature set on this radio is fantastic, right? I mean, it's got multiple key jacks, which I thought was weird at first, but I love. It's got key speed right on the front of the radio. That, for me, that is super important. If I want a QRS for somebody, I don't want to have to go into a menu. I just want to turn a knob, right? I don't want to mess around with having to go into menus, right? I can add Farnsworth, but I'd much prefer to actually match their key speed. Actual adjustable gains, man. That's one of those things. One of the things I hate on my mountain toppers. As much as I love those radios, they really need adjustable gains. Now, people complain. They're like, well, we don't want knobs on them. They don't need to be knobs. You can just put little sliders in the front of those radios, or little thumb wheels, like little potentiometer style thumb wheels that are recessed into the radio where you just roll them up and down. But they don't. And that's one of the things that drives me nuts about those radios. This radio's got a fantastic meter that gives you a lot of information, right? It's an S meter, it's an SWR meter, it's a power meter. It's a 5-band radio. It's got a fantastic encoder. It's got adjustable filtering. It's got a Z-Match tuner. I love Z-Match tuners. They can be a little finicky, but the cool thing about a Z-Match is A, they will match just about anything, and B, they don't take any power to run. None, zero. This thing's just, you turn the knobs, you get it matched, and you're good. No battery power whatsoever. So that's something I really like. The audio quality on this thing is fantastic. This radio ticks a lot of boxes for a lot of people. Now let's talk about the downsides. I'll start with downsides that are going to apply for everybody, and then I'm going to move to some of the more things that are issues for me personally. Issue number one, filtering. Even though this has adjustable filters, you're going to get some adjacent signal bleed over on this thing. You just heard it. It's not horrendous, but it can be distracting. This KX1 does a better job of that. The receiver in this radio, while it's not fantastic, it does a better job. I can narrow that filter down and get rid of those signals that I can't do with this, even with the adjustable filter. It's not bad. I've got worse radios, but that is an issue. Another thing that I don't like, that I think is an issue probably for some people, is the placement of these switches. They're underneath these handles. Now, I know they just were looking for real estate, and those are things you might not use all the time, but they're in kind of inconvenient locations. Okay, so that might be an issue. Now, let's talk about the big issues for me, and that's size, weight, and portability. This thing is a chonker. It is big. There's my FTDX10. It's huge. It's a massive radio. It weighs a ton. It's almost 3 pounds. Okay, this is not And I'm not saying you couldn't, but this probably is not the radio that you want to go do sodas with. You could. I mean, it would do it. It's not crazy heavy, but there are better options for that. And then another thing that really kind of makes this radio tough for me to choose for a lot of things is it is so busy. There are so many knobs, so many switches sticking off of everywhere that it makes it a little hard to pack, like I said before. All right. So when we look at that radio compared to this radio, all right, the KX1 is obviously much, much smaller, and it is much, much lighter. It is also not as capable a radio. It can't do some of the things that this TR-45 will do. You know, the tuner in this thing's nowhere near as good as the tuner in this. The internal battery situation in this is a joke compared to this. No internal speaker. The display is a joke. But it is very small. It is very light. I think the receiver and filtering are a little better on this radio. That's to my ear. Now, Ed would probably disagree with me. That's okay. People can disagree. For me, for what I do, sometimes this would be a better radio. If I'm doing a hike-in, POTA, or a soda activation, this is going to be a better radio. If I'm doing a drive-up POTA like I did today where I drove up and then had to carry the radio a couple hundred feet, this is an infinitely better radio. Like, it's not even a competition. If I'm not worried about size and weight, and it's between these two radios, forget the KX1. I'm taking this 100% of the time. It's just the feature set's better, the sound quality's better, the tuner's better, the internal battery situation's better. Overall, this is a better radio for most people who are going to do most things. This is probably a better radio. It is not a better radio for people who are going to do hike-in stuff or like hike up summits, hike-in POTAs, or, you know, where you're worried about pack weight and anything like that. This is not the solution for you. So can I pick a winner? This might be a lot like the 705 versus the KX2 situation where I copped out and didn't pick a winner. This is kind of the same way. There isn't a winner between these two radios. They're not for the same person. I mean, they might be because I will probably buy one of these, but they're not for the same person. This radio is for somebody who's looking for a small, very light, very packable QRP CW field radio that ticks all the boxes. Internal tuner, internal battery setup, although it's kind of hot garbage, adjustable filter, adjustable gains, good receiver, good filtering. This radio is better. For pretty much any other situation, when you're not worried about packing in, this is probably going to be a better radio for you. Like I said, it's more functional. It's got way more features. It's a much newer radio. I mean, you can buy one of these right now. I don't know when they stopped selling these, but it's been a long time since these were available, right? This thing's an antique, comparatively speaking. So radios have come a long way. Like I said, the few flaws on this radio, aside from size, weight, form factor, which for me, like I said, if I'm doing a drive up, I don't care. If I'm hiking, I'm not taking this radio. I'm just not. If I was going to do a Penntek, it'd either be a 45 skinny or more than likely it'd be a TR-35. A TR-35 would be a comparable radio to this, although this has more features than a TR-35 does. But you could put a TR-35 up against like a mountain topper all day, every day. In fact, if I can get my hands on a TR-35, I may be getting my hands on one soon. If I can get my hands on a TR-35, I'll put it up against the mountain topper and we'll talk strengths and weaknesses. But like I said, at the end of the day, this video is going to be a lot like the KX2 versus 705 situation. I can't necessarily pick a winner. I can pick a winner for different types of people. Like I said, if you are not going to be doing hike-in stuff, if you're going to be carrying your stuff in less than a quarter mile and you're not worried about weight and you want a full-featured rig that's CW only, that you pick the radio up and you don't need anything other than a key and an antenna, buy this radio. The sound quality is excellent. The feature set is excellent. This is a very compelling situation. Very compelling radio. Like I said, the only time that this radio wouldn't be a good choice is if you're hiking in. And if you're hiking in and you're carrying stuff, especially if you're carrying it up a mountain or any real long distance, this is going to be a better radio for you. For most people. Now, there are people, you take like Adam, K6ARK, he'll carry a Icom 7300 up a mountain. He's kind of crazy, but for me, I'm probably not going to carry a 3-pound radio this size up a mountain. If I was going to carry a radio this big and this heavy, it wouldn't be a CW only radio. And it would definitely not be a 5-watt radio. It would be at least a 20-watt radio or a 100-watt radio, and I would want it to do other stuff. So like I said, if you are hiking, worried about pack weight, but want a radio that's got a decent feature set, a great receiver, good filtering, a passable tuner, and kind of ticks all those boxes, this is a great radio. Hard to get. Definitely not for everybody. If you're a newer CW op and you're looking for a soda type radio, go buy a Mountain Topper or like I said, a TR-35 or maybe a QMX. Although the firmware on the QMX is kind of a mess right now. A QCX Mini might be a better option, but that's only a monoband radio. So, but like I said, this thing for all of the things this does, this is a very, very awesome package for hiking stuff. For everybody else, if you're not that person, if you're not carrying it in, I think this is overall a better radio. Like I said, I know that was a little bit of a cop-out, kind of like my KX2 versus 705 was. But again, those radios are for two different people for the exact same reason, right? The KX2 was better for somebody who's carrying radios around. Other than that, the 705 is a better radio in just about every other way, with the exception of the tuner. This is the same thing, only this has got the tuner in it. This really does tick every box. Like I said, other than those few little niggles, the odd placement of some of the controls, the adjacent signal bleed over. But like I said, that's not just this radio. That's almost every small CW only radio that you're going to find out there. And then, like I said, for me, the form factor is just funky. It's huge. It's heavy. It's got stuff sticking out of everywhere, which makes it not easy to pack, right? So like I said, if I was doing an activation like I did today where I'm setting up at a picnic table, it's a couple 100 feet from my truck, this is a fantastic radio. I don't want to carry it up a mountain. If I'm carrying it up a mountain, I'm going to take this guy. So that's the KX2 versus the TR-45 Lite. I hope it was informative. I hope if you're looking at these two radios, it gave you a little bit of food for thought as far as making a decision. Realistically, for what those KX1s cost, unless you really want one, I probably wouldn't buy one. If you can find a good deal on one, especially one that's got all the features like this one, that's got the tuner, that's got all the bands, all that stuff. If you can find one of these at a reasonable price, go for it. I've seen 2-band radios without the tuners going for like $750. Don't do that. That's what this thing costs. This is a $740 radio, and this would run circles around the radio. So, Ed, I really appreciate you letting me spend some time with this radio. It's been awesome. Like I said, I will, after using this, I think I'm probably going to pick one up. I was a little disappointed after I did my first activation, but now that I've played with it more and used it in another activation where it performed much better, and I've used it here in the shack and it's worked great, I think I'm going to buy one. It just is an all-around fantastic package. So like I said, I really appreciate everybody watching. I hope it was informative. As I get more radios in, I will do more of these. I actually have another radio on the way, a loaner, that I'm going to do a little bit of review on. It is an older radio. We'll see how that one goes, and we'll go from there. And as I get more radios, either I purchase more radios or people let me use their radios, I will do more of these, and I will kind of give you the pros and cons so you can make good decisions when you go to buy radios. So everybody, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Until the next one, 7-3.